With both Disney and Marvel already panicking over Ironheart episodes 1 through 3 and the ongoing ratings disaster that it is, there is also way too much focus on the LGBTQ community by the fandom in a negative manner. And it just needs to go away, I think, for a healthy story to grow, and for Riri to really share her limelight with...
Natalie AI thing seems utterly preposterous and ridiculous, and even for an MCU show, I'm finding it to be a little bit of a bridge too far to go. The Heist crew, all lame. Every single one of them, all lame.
And so in this, I'm not sure what they're meant to be, because this character isn't to be confused with Slog.
Slug, our hacker extraordinaire.
Who is also the exact opposite in the same show. I'm really confused.
It deserves your attention. Ironheart deserves your attention. That's how I knew. I was like, oh, they are desperate to get people to watch this show. But after I did my reaction, I kept getting, hey, it wasn't that bad. I just watched it. Hey, I just watched the first 3 episodes. It wasn't that bad.
Ironheart might be one of the worst executed ideas ever in the MCU, because under all that garbage was actually potential.
Yeah, and it's like the real Tony Stark. It's like back somehow, and there's like a moment where she's flying through and he's like, who is that? And she's like, I'm Ironheart, Mr. Stark. And he's like, I like that girl. And then he like goes to do something else. Like that would be like the level of something that I think would possibly happen.
Ironheart is back, this time going to an uncomfortable place for viewers.
Ironheart is the biggest L of Marvel of all time. The reactions are just spectacular. Supposedly he's smarter than Tony Stark, bites an electric wire, sells her soul to gain magic powers, uses new powers to steal. What did the writers mean by this? Smoke detector beeps.
I can understand why she's frustrated. That's how I feel watching her interviews.
How do you feel about the impact that she's having on young Black girls? And I'm going to be completely honest, on Black women.
You know, this is yet another area that's getting vibrant. It's getting full in the way that it should be.
Ironheart is practically unwatchable.
This show basically keyed their car, their mom, and in their bowl of cereal in the morning.
They have Dominique Thorne, you know, going out there talking about DEI, LGBTQ rights, and how there's no agenda there, and she continues to do so. But the other thing is that they also had Robert Downey Jr., and they had him roll out and really kind of prop the show up and prop the character of Riri Williams up above Tony Stark.
So here's the update everyone's talking about. Ironheart Season 2 has been canceled, with Marvel quietly pulling the plug after months of growing controversy. And while at first glance this might look like just another programming change, the truth runs much deeper. This isn't just about one series. It's about whether Marvel is willing to actually stand by the stories it claims to support. Because let's be clear, Ironheart wasn't just another Disney Plus show. It was part of Marvel's big push to create a new, more diverse generation of heroes. Following the introduction of Kamala Khan, Kate Bishop, and even America Chavez, Riri Williams was supposed to be the centerpiece, a young genius stepping into Iron Man's shoes, while also breaking barriers in representation. For Marvel, this was marketed as the future. But instead of becoming a milestone, it became a lightning rod. Online review bombing, social media outrage, and daily calls for boycotts turned the series into one of the most divisive in Marvel's lineup. And when whispers started that Season 2 would double down on its inclusive storytelling, the backlash only intensified. Behind the scenes, Disney executives, already wary of subscriber losses and brand reputation, saw the writing on the wall. They didn't push forward, they backed down. And that's where the story becomes more than just about Ironheart. Because if Marvel is willing to sideline a character as central as Riri Williams over fear of backlash, what does that mean for the rest of the MCU's next generation? Is this the start of a full retreat from bold storytelling, or is it just one misstep in an already shaky Phase 5? Before the backlash ever hit, Ironheart was supposed to be Marvel's answer to a looming problem. What comes after Iron Man? When Tony Stark bowed out in Avengers Endgame, the MCU lost not just a character, but its central heartbeat. Marvel needed someone new to carry that kind of cultural weight, and Riri Williams looked like the perfect candidate. Created in the comics in 2016, Riri wasn't just another armored hero. She was a prodigy, a 15-year-old genius from Chicago who reverse-engineered her own Iron Man suit at MIT. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, and she wasn't part of the usual superhero mold. She represented a new era, young, brilliant, and unapologetically different. For readers who had long asked when Marvel would finally put someone who looked and thought like them at the center of a story, Ironheart was the answer. Marvel Studios saw that potential and fast-tracked her introduction. Riri first appeared in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, a move designed to tie her brilliance to Wakanda's tech legacy. It wasn't just a cameo, it was Marvel planting the flag that this character mattered. The spin-off series on Disney Plus was announced almost immediately, positioned as one of the tentpoles for the MCU's next-generation strategy. And the studio wasn't subtle about it. Press releases called Ironheart a milestone for representation. Early interviews painted Dominique Thorne as more than an actress. She was a symbol of what Marvel wanted its future to look like. Merchandise was lined up, partnerships were signed, and Disney Plus marketed the show as proof that the MCU wasn't stuck in the past. For fans, the anticipation was real. Here was a character stepping into the shadow of Tony Stark, but not trying to copy him.
We already know that those out there like Dominique Thorne, the main actress of the show who plays Riri Williams, after really going after fans and really going after the critics, it's only making matters worse for both Disney and Marvel.
Instead, she was bringing her own voice, her own identity, and her own story into the spotlight. It felt like Marvel was finally ready to move forward. But as we now know, that bright beginning was only the calm before the storm. Because once Ironheart actually debuted, the reaction was far more complicated than Marvel ever expected. When Ironheart finally hit Disney Plus, it immediately stood apart from anything Marvel had done before. Unlike Eternals or even Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which sprinkled in representation quietly, Ironheart didn't hide behind subtle nods. From the start, it was bold, unapologetic, and ready to put identity front and center. The first season dug deep into Riri Williams as more than just a replacement Iron Man. It showcased her genius at MIT, her challenges balancing intellect with youth, and her determination to build something that was truly her own. But what made the show polarizing was how it tackled themes Marvel usually danced around. Issues of race, gender, and queerness weren't in the background. They were woven directly into the story. Leaks from the writer's room and early chatter hinted that Season 2 would go even further, exploring Riri's relationships and identity with more depth than any MCU project to date. For Marvel, this was the next step in diversifying their universe, moving from token gestures to actual storytelling driven by inclusivity. It was a huge swing, and Marvel seemed confident enough to take it. Dominique Thorne leaned into that vision as well. In interviews, she emphasized how important Riri was as a cultural figure, a young Black genius who didn't fit the traditional mold of a superhero, but who demanded space in the Marvel universe. Fans who had long wanted a character that truly reflected their world found it in Ironheart. For them, the show wasn't just entertainment, it was validation. But boldness comes with consequences. The very elements that supporters celebrated became flashpoints for others. Discussions around diversity in media were already heated, and Ironheart became the perfect target. While Marvel hoped the series would be remembered as a milestone, critics saw it as a provocation. And soon, the backlash started bubbling. Because as it turns out, Marvel's gamble on going all in with representation didn't just divide opinions, it triggered one of the loudest controversies the MCU had seen in years. And the reaction wasn't just about the storylines, it was about something much bigger. The backlash against Ironheart didn't wait for the season to fully unfold. It started the moment the show was announced. Online forums, Twitter threads, and YouTube commentary were quick to frame the series as another example of Marvel forcing politics into superhero stories. Even before Dominique Thorne's Riri Williams appeared on screen, critics had already made up their minds. This wasn't about story.
The thing about Ironheart is that yes, we do know that the last 3 episodes will be debuting tonight, by the way, really fulfilling the show for Season 1, and I highly doubt that there's going to be a Season 2, based on the ratings disaster that it is, based on the critics really calling the show out for what it is.
This was about agenda. Once the first episodes dropped, the pushback escalated into something more organized. Review sites like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb saw waves of suspiciously low ratings, the hallmark of what fans now call review bombing. At the same time, hashtags like Keep Politics, Out of Superheroes, and Woke Marvel started trending almost daily, fueled by creators who argued Marvel had abandoned action and adventure in favor of social commentary. What made Ironheart different from other Marvel controversies was the intensity. When Eternals introduced Marvel's first openly gay character, or when Doctor Strange 2 hinted at queer parenting, the debates were heated but short-lived. With Ironheart, it was relentless. Every new plot detail, every leaked script, and every character choice was dissected and turned into evidence of Marvel pushing identity politics. At the center of it all was Riri herself. Supporters saw her as a breakthrough, a black queer genius front and center in the MCU. Detractors saw her as proof that Marvel was drifting too far from what they considered the core of superhero storytelling, and instead of dying down, the noise grew louder with each passing week. Soon, boycotts were being called for. Posts encouraged Disney Plus subscribers to cancel their memberships. YouTube commentators capitalized on the outrage, turning Ironheart into one of the most polarizing Marvel discussions since Captain Marvel. What Marvel hoped would be seen as progress was instead branded, by its critics, as indoctrination. And as the backlash reached fever pitch, it created a pressure point Marvel Studios couldn't ignore. Because behind the outrage wasn't just noise, it was threatening the one thing Disney values most: its brand stability. And that's when corporate decision-makers stepped in. Marvel has never been just about storytelling. It's about protecting one of the most valuable brands in entertainment. And when the backlash over Ironheart started cutting through the noise, Disney's corporate machinery quickly shifted into damage control mode. This wasn't only about one show anymore. It was about the ripple effects on Disney Plus, a platform already under pressure from subscriber churn, rising costs, and slowing growth. Inside Disney, executives had a simple calculation.
Certain is that this is a show that nobody asked for. This is also a show that is based on a comic back in 2016 that was canceled, quite frankly. That's also another fact that people have to realize. But focusing on Disney CEO Bob Iger and Kevin Feige, they are desperately trying to oversell this show to a degree that we have never seen before.
Was Ironheart worth the risk? They had seen what happened when projects stirred cultural firestorms. Lightyear faced bans in international markets for LGBTQ themes. Strange World underperformed financially after being branded as too political. Even Marvel's own Eternals had trouble overseas, with entire countries refusing to screen it unless scenes were altered. For Disney, these were not creative debates. They were business red flags. Ironheart's second season scripts, which reportedly leaned further into LGBTQ identity and character relationships, were seen as a lightning rod. On paper, the numbers didn't justify the gamble. Disney Plus growth had slowed, Wall Street was watching, and Marvel was already facing criticism for spreading itself too thin, with multiple projects underperforming. The decision was made. Shelving Season 2 would avoid fueling more controversy at a time when the company could least afford it. But that choice came at a cost. To many fans and critics alike, Disney's move looked like retreat, not leadership. After years of promoting itself as a champion of diversity, the sudden cancellation sent a very different message. Inclusivity is fine, but only if it doesn't threaten the bottom line. And while executives believed they were containing risk, what they actually did was ignite a new firestorm. One questioning Marvel's credibility, its long-term strategy, and its willingness to stand behind the very values it had marketed. The irony? By trying to protect its brand, Disney ended up damaging it in a far more lasting way, and no one felt that sting more personally than Dominique Thorne herself. For Dominique Thorne, the cancellation of Ironheart Season 2 wasn't just another setback in Hollywood. It felt personal. From the moment she stepped into the role of Riri Williams, Thorne carried the weight of more than just a character. She was embodying Marvel's promise of progress, a young black woman playing a genius who stood shoulder to shoulder with Tony Stark's legacy, representing audiences who had rarely seen themselves centered in superhero storytelling. When reports surfaced that Season 2 was being shelved because of the backlash, insiders described Thorne's reaction as one of visible frustration. And it wasn't hard to see why. She had been vocal in interviews about how important the role was, not only for her career but for what it represented. Riri wasn't just another superhero to her. She was a cultural marker. She embodied intelligence, queerness, resilience, and identity all at once. Losing that platform didn't just mean losing screen time.
So let's get into this. Now, one thing about Bob Iger is that we know that I, along with many others out there, like to call him Bob Liger, because all this guy does is lie to the audience, he lies to the shareholders, he lies to anybody out there. in order to really kind of string them along into the following year in hopes that they will stay around, whether it's shareholders or customers. And we already know that Disney Plus is a failing platform.
It meant losing an opportunity to push the MCU in a direction fans had long been demanding. To make matters worse, Thorne had already been positioned as a central piece of Marvel's future. From her introduction in Wakanda Forever to early teases of her importance in Phase 5 and beyond, Ironheart wasn't meant to be a side project. She was supposed to help usher in the next generation of Avengers. With Season 2 gone, that trajectory suddenly looks uncertain. Fans felt the sting alongside her. Social media quickly lit up with support, with many arguing that Thorne was being let down by the very studio that had promised to amplify her voice. Others pointed out that Marvel had put her in the spotlight, only to abandon her the moment the noise got too loud. The sense of betrayal wasn't just about a canceled show, it was about broken promises. For Thorne, the frustration symbolized something larger, the fight to prove that representation can't just be a slogan, it has to be backed by commitment. And if Marvel wasn't willing to stand behind Ironheart, what did that mean for every other inclusive character waiting for their turn? The shelving of Ironheart Season 2 didn't just impact Dominique Thorne, it sent shockwaves across the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. Riri Williams had been positioned as a bridge character, someone who could link Wakanda's advanced technology, Tony Stark's legacy, and the MCU's younger heroes. Without her second season, a major piece of Marvel's roadmap is suddenly missing. From the start, Ironheart was meant to set up bigger crossovers. Her debut in Wakanda Forever hinted at a long-term partnership with Shuri, potentially laying groundwork for new alliances between Wakanda and the Avengers. Early leaks suggested she could also play a role in the rumored Young Avengers lineup, alongside Kamala Khan, Kate Bishop, and America Chavez. But with her arc now cut short, that potential is left hanging. It raises the question, how do you build a cohesive next generation of heroes if you keep pulling them off the board? The timing couldn't be worse for Marvel. Phase 5 has already faced uneven reception. Projects like Secret Invasion underperformed, the Marvels struggled at the box office, and even highly anticipated shows like Echo faced delays. Ironheart was supposed to be one of the bright spots, carrying both cultural significance and fresh storylines. Losing it weakens the overall structure. And it's not just about narrative gaps. Within the industry, creators are watching closely. Writers, producers, and directors see the cancellation as a warning sign.
It is a failing business model for, of course, Disney. You know, we already know that Tony Gilroy admitted to this, the guy who created the Andor series, both Season 1 and Season 2. Disney just doesn't have the amount of money that they have anymore to create all of these shows. However, interestingly enough, with the Ironheart ratings disaster only getting worse for those at Disney and Marvel,
if Marvel is willing to sideline Riri Williams, then no project pushing boundaries is safe. It creates hesitation, discouraging bold pitches that might expand the MCU in new directions. Even fans are noticing the inconsistency. Marvel promotes itself as forward-thinking, yet keeps retreating when controversies arise. The fear now is that other projects, like Agatha Darkhold Diaries or Echo, could face similar treatment if Backlash intensifies. And once audiences begin to doubt Marvel's commitment, the very brand loyalty Disney depends on starts to crack. So while Ironheart was only one series, its cancellation leaves a gap much larger than a single season. It disrupts Marvel's future plans, undermines fan trust, and puts the studio's long-term vision into question. The cancellation of Ironheart wasn't just a Marvel decision, it became part of a much bigger cultural struggle playing out across media and politics. In recent years, projects featuring LGBTQ characters or diverse leads have consistently faced backlash campaigns, from online review bombing to outright boycotts. Ironheart found itself caught in the middle of this storm, and its shelving has now become symbolic of the larger battle between progress and pushback in entertainment. We've seen this pattern before. Pixar's Lightyear faced bans in multiple countries over a same-sex kiss. Disney's Strange World underperformed at the box office after being labeled too political. Even Marvel's Eternals was pulled from theaters in certain markets unless edits were made. Every time a studio attempted to move inclusivity from the sidelines to the center, resistance followed. With Ironheart, that resistance wasn't just vocal, it was relentless. The problem is that these decisions don't just silence one project. They send a message to creators across the industry. Writers now hesitate to pitch stories with queer or minority protagonists. Directors scale back scripts to avoid controversy. The fear of losing funding, markets, or subscribers hangs over every decision. In effect, Backlash doesn't just target one show, it shapes the culture of what even gets made. That's why Ironheart's cancellation feels so heavy. It isn't just a creative setback. It represents the fragility of progress in Hollywood. Representation is celebrated on marketing posters and red carpets, but when the pressure mounts, corporate risk management takes priority. It tells audiences that inclusivity is welcome only when it's convenient.
Already those like Kevin Feige and Bob Iger are heading into damage control mode at a level that we have never seen before. In this case, Bob Iger got very defensive after the LGBTQ backlash, and also in the midst of the ratings beginning to tank already. Now, Iger recently delivered the following in a desperate move to damage control the situation.
And that reality fuels frustration among fans who believe the industry had turned a corner. Because for them, superheroes aren't just entertainment. They're mirrors of identity, symbols of possibility, and proof that their stories matter. When those stories are cut short, it's not just disappointing, it's demoralizing. But this cultural battle doesn't end here. The fallout from Ironheart now raises deeper questions about Marvel's future, and whether the studio will retreat further or learn to withstand the noise. For Marvel fans, the shelving of Ironheart Season 2 isn't just another canceled show, it feels like a betrayal. From the moment Riri Williams was introduced, audiences who had rarely seen themselves represented in the MCU finally felt included. Young viewers, queer fans, and communities long sidelined by Hollywood were given a hero who looked like them, thought like them, and fought for space in a universe dominated by legacy characters. To see that promise pulled back so suddenly leaves a mark that goes beyond entertainment. Fans now question Marvel's commitment to its own message. Was inclusivity ever truly the priority, or was it simply a marketing strategy that crumbled the second controversy got too loud? This skepticism is dangerous for a brand that has built its empire on long-term loyalty. Once trust is shaken, it's hard to rebuild. The larger issue is what happens next. Without Ironheart's second season, Marvel's roadmap has a hole. The MCU thrives on continuity, on characters building through multiple arcs until they become iconic. Cutting Riri's story short disrupts not just her growth, but also the broader push to bring in a younger, more diverse generation of Avengers. If audiences see these new characters as disposable, it undermines the entire transition Marvel has been planning since Endgame. And beyond Marvel, the cancellation casts doubt on Hollywood's future of inclusive storytelling. Will studios double down, or will they pull back even further? If Ironheart can be cut after only one season despite fan enthusiasm and cultural significance, what message does that send to every other creator fighting to bring authentic stories to screen? For fans who believe this was the start of something bigger, the loss is personal. It says progress is still fragile, and heroes who break the mold are still seen as risky. Whether Marvel admits it or not, this decision reshapes the way audiences view its entire brand.
As CEO, it is 100% my responsibility to remain direct and transparent, and that doesn't just go for our customers, it goes for our shareholders as well. With our latest project, Ironheart, I want to be very truthful to our core customer base that our latest series is a wide success regardless of what you have been hearing in the trades.
And unless something changes, the cost could extend far beyond a single show. The end of Ironheart. Season 2, before it even began, isn't just another Marvel scheduling change. It's a reflection of a studio caught between two worlds, the world it promises and the world it fears. On one hand, Marvel built its empire by taking risks, by turning unknown characters like Iron Man and Guardians of the Galaxy into global icons. On the other hand, when the pressure comes from loud cultural pushback, those risks suddenly look like liabilities. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because Ironheart wasn't canceled due to low viewership or poor reception, the first season held strong enough to justify more. It was pulled back because the themes it embraced became too politically charged. That's not just a creative decision, that's a cultural retreat. For Dominique Thorne, it means a role that could have defined her career is left hanging in limbo. For fans, it means a hero who finally reflected them has been pushed back into the shadows. And for Marvel, it raises a haunting question. If the studio can't stand firm behind its most inclusive projects, what does that mean for the future of the MCU? The truth is, Ironheart could have been a milestone. It could have proven that superhero storytelling has room for everyone, and that audiences are ready for heroes who break away from tradition. Instead, it will now be remembered as a turning point for the wrong reasons. A project that showed just how fragile progress still is in blockbuster media. And that's the real sting. Not that a show was canceled, but that an opportunity was lost. Marvel had a chance to lead, but instead, it chose to step back. And as the industry moves forward, the question lingers. Who will have the courage to tell these stories without compromise?